Hello everyone, my name is Remy. I'm from the Eavestaker community, and today I'm joined by Phil from ChainSafe and Lodestar. Hello, Phil.
Hey Remy, how's it going?
Good, and you? Today we have a special tech demo video about how doing your own Lodestar setup. But before we dive into this whole subject, I'd like Phil to tell us a little more about what he does at ChainSafe and what's this guide that we're going to be following today.
Thanks, Remy. My name is Phil No. I work at ChainSafe as a technical project manager. I actually joined here in July of 2021. I've been with the Lodestar team since November of 2021. Lodestar is, of course, as you may know, a TypeScript client implementation of Ethereum consensus. And sort of what I do here is I manage the team, the project itself, alongside helping to organize and ensure that the client remains steady, optimal, and is ready for use on mainnet, in which it is. That's pretty much what I do here at ChainSafe. I'm fully focused here on the Lodestar project, and ChainSafe itself works on many different things, not just on Ethereum, but also on other blockchains as well.
Can you let us know why someone would want to use Lodestar as its consensus client?
Yeah, so we are actually like a client that went to mainnet production in about November 2021. So yes, we may be a little bit late comparatively to some of the other clients, but that is also not a bad thing. We are the fifth consensus client to come online, which is much better for client diversity. We are the only TypeScript client, which helps open the doors to a lot of TypeScript and JavaScript devs as well. By us being the lowest used at the moment, it also helps to keep Ethereum safe. When you look at utilizing an Ethereum consensus client, some of the incentives you have to think of is not necessarily just how much money you can make, but also what your risk tolerance level is, because the more people that use a specific client, the more inherent risk there is if something were to go wrong with it. So we are kind of a plan E, I guess, for most people now.
Good to know. With these words, let's get started with the guide here. Let me go ahead and share my screen so that you can see it. And let me just go and try to fix some of these issues with my thingy here. There you go. All right, so we should be good, and you should be seeing my screen now. Uh, what is this guide here that we're looking at?
So actually, when I started here with Lodestar, I realized one of the hardest things is to actually, lay out the step by step how to actually set up a client, because we do have a problem in Ethereum with client stickiness, and a lot of the times, if we don't necessarily give people the information that they need, a lot of the times they'll either give up or they'll have to troubleshoot themselves, which is more time on their end. So taking upon the model that Somer had done for all the other clients earlier when the Beacon chain launched, I thought it would be very prudent of me to actually do something similar for the Lodestar client. So this is what this setup guide is. This is the version 2 of it. I did have an earlier iteration, but this one is the most updated one here to get people to set up from scratch.
So let's get started with the guide here. We have a bunch of steps. Obviously, if you're not aware, this step will focus on using Ubuntu 20.04. So you have to install that first. If you have issues with that, we can help you with the Eavestaker community. We'll be using Geth as the execution client, but maybe there's different options there. And once we get there, we'll talk about those as well. We'll set up the Lodestar client. and we'll have to install Docker first and Docker Compose. And maybe we'll be using MetaMask to do the deposit, but we'll see how long this whole tech demo lasts. If you don't know, if you want to do your own validator setup, you need 32 ETH. That's for mainnet. In our case, we'll be doing this setup on Prater, so that'll be free for us. Unfortunately, Prater uses girly Ethereums, and girly has been abused for a bunch of weeks and months now, so it's getting a little hard to get a hold of 32 Go ETH, the currency used by the Prater network to do the deposit. But if you need help, the ETHSeeker community can also help you there. Like I said here, there's a bunch of different places that you can go to if you need support for this guide, or like support in general for Lodestar. The first one is the ChainSafe Discord. You should definitely join their Discords if you run or if you're a user of the Lodestar client. There's another important channel that you should also be following. It's the announcement. So every time there's a new version being released, there'll be an announcement there. If there's any issues that you need to be paying attention to, it'll be posted there too. For the prerequisite, you'll need Ubuntu server. I'm gonna be using Ubuntu desktop here, so maybe that'll work too. We'll see. And MetaMask and a browser. So nothing special. In terms of hardware, what kind of hardware are we looking at here, Phil?
So, of course, we're not necessarily the most efficient programming language being used here with Lodestar. So, we do require something a little bit more significant than, say, like a Raspberry Pi. However, a generalized computer these days will be able to handle it. Our heap size memory usage is somewhere along the lines of like as low as like 1.5 gigs so far. So a general purpose computer these days will do. Doesn't even need to be like one of those hardcore gaming computers either.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you don't need like this huge beefy machine to run your own validator setups. What I usually recommend is like anything that has like 4+ cores, and which is like a recent CPU should do the jobs in terms of processing powers, in terms of memory. Maybe you'll need something along those lines of 8 GB or like 16 GB of RAM. And in terms of storage, I believe those numbers are only for storing the consensus data. But if you want to run your own execution client as well, which is what we recommend generally, you'll need something more along those lines of like either 1 TB of SSD space or like 2 TB.
Yes, the biggest thing with this is, of course, the type of storage hardware you use. Highly recommend using the M.2 NVMe SSDs because those have much higher write and read speeds. That is generally the most important thing alongside the capacity, which I would recommend, at least like a 2 TB stick at this point.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea here. Let's keep going here on the overview. We'll be generating our staking validator keys. We will probably skip some of these security recommendations in terms of like firewall and security, but we'll talk about those. We'll set up our execution client. We'll set up and configure the Lodestar client, including like doing the prerequisites installations, and we'll do the deposit. Maybe we'll see how it goes. And so this guide is separated in different parts. And the first part being the generating the staking data here. So that's generating your keys. As usual, like if you want to do this on mainnet eventually and stake your own money, you should probably try this on a testnet first, which is this recommendation here. Running on a testnet is free. You can try it. You can see how it goes. You can gather all the data that you want. You can experience it first and you can like eventually tell if it's for you, like in terms of instructions and maintenance and like doing it all yourself. So that's a pretty good recommendation here. So let's get started with part 1, generating the staking data. In this guide, we have a bunch of options. The options that I like here is not using the official staking deposit CLI, but using the Wagyu installer, not the Wagyu installer, the Wagyu keygen here, which should be down below. So if you don't know, the Wagyu keygen is a tool that I'm part of, that we created. So let me just download it here, show you guys how it looks. So if you want to run it on Ubuntu here, you just have to make this download file executable and you can start it here. So the Wagyu keygen is this simple tool that enables you to generate your own validator keys here. Nothing fancy about it. So if you are to create your new keys, you just create here, click here on this new create new recovery phrase. You have to select the proper network. Today we'll be doing this demo with the Prater testnet, so that's what we'll be using. And we have like a bunch of these descriptions about what you should be paying attention to, like make sure to actually write down all these words. Since this is just a test for us, we'll go ahead and we'll just copy and paste the words. I'll be using a weak password here, but maybe you should create a stronger password for your own users, especially if you are to do this on mainnet.
And I would just add here as well, if you're doing this on mainnet, it's much better for you to run this keygen likely on a air-gapped computer as well.
That's a very good point.
Fresh. Yeah.
And so like you don't want this to be running like on any internet connected devices because of the potential risk of someone being able to steal your keys and like eventually steal your money, right? And so running this on an offline computer, maybe on a live distribution would be even better there. So at this final step here, we just select on which directory we want to generate the keys in, and we click the create button. So nothing special here. It'll take a few seconds and eventually we'll get our keys. If I click on this link here, I'll see the keys being generated with our deposit data file that we'll need to do the deposit. So nothing special here. There's a bunch of other text that you should be reading. I've done this so many times at this point that I'm just gonna skip ahead and go to our next step. So I believe we are done with part 1 of this guide. So we generated the keys and we are good to go for the next step. The next step would be part 2, but like I said previously, I'm gonna skip this part, but you should probably not, right? So this part has a lot of good practices that you can follow to secure and harden your own machine where you'll be staking. And it's very important to do so in terms of like managing your own risks, right? So you want to limit all the interfaces on which people can connect to your server. You want to make sure that you're using like good SSH keys to connect to your servers if you need to. You want to make sure to use a properly configured firewall, and there's a bunch of other things that you should be doing here. Since this is just a simple pack demo on a testnet, I'm not gonna bother you with all these different steps, but you should definitely look into these. The interesting part here is going to be the guide to set up a Lodestar itself, right? And so the first step would be to install the Docker engine. Docker is this tool that we'll be using to run all our clients, right? So instead of just retyping those commands, I'm just going to copy and paste them here. I'm kind of lazy, and so this is just faster for me. All right, so we're just entering this command here. We're just letting Ubuntu download all these packages. And in the end, after all of these different logs that you see on screen here, you'll have Docker install. Nothing special about this. This is just the usual way to install any software with Ubuntu. Once I'm done with that, I'm gonna make sure the Ubuntu service is always running whenever I start this machine. So if I were to reboot the machine, Docker would start on restart. And we'll make sure we have Docker Compose properly installed by checking its version. There we go. We have version 1.25, which should be good for us here. This next step here is going to download Lodestar. And we will be using this folder to get started with installing all the configuration that we need for Lodestar. So let's get into Lodestar. Whenever you use this Docker Compose tool, you have to use this env file. And so we will be opening the file with nano. Nano is this command line tool that you can use to open and read any file and modify it. So in our case here, we don't want to be using the mainnet network. We want to be running on Prater. So I'll have to change this option here and save my file. So what I did there is just Control X. There was this small little menu at the bottom that said Control X is meant to write the file. It asked me what name I want to write this in. I just press enter. The .env file name is correct. It's the same file. I just want to override it. And what I did here is just what was mentioned in this notice box here. So if you want to run on Prater, you have to change this variable here, the Lodestar network. Once you're done with that, you'll have to create your own Docker Compose file. And you shouldn't be too worried about that. We will just copy and paste one, which is pretty good for most of the use cases here. So I'm just going to copy and paste this whole text here.
This one here is actually for the Netamine Docker. So you have 3 options now. This is the updated version. So surprise everyone, we support client diversity.
That's pretty good.
I just updated this today actually. So the first YAML file that you see up there is if you want to run Netamine as part of your execution node. And then further down, there's option 2 and option 3, one of them being for Besu and then the other one for being GAT. And then you just need one YAML file depending on which one you choose to run.
Awesome. I haven't tried the Netamine YAML file yet, but maybe that's a good thing to do, right? We'll see how it works and we'll see how it goes here. So let's go ahead and use Netamine as our execution client. And this leads me to this whole discussion about which execution client you should be using, right? Because here we have 3 different choices. Phil, can you tell us which one someone should be using?
Yeah, so if there's a really cool site called clientdiversity.org that someone in the community had set up for us, which actually shows you the current combination of clients that are both on the consensus layer and also the execution layer. So right now we obviously have very little usage for Lodestar, but it gets worse when you actually go down to the execution clients because we have much more of a super majority with GAT. So part of the reason why I updated this guide to include the some other execution clients is because we want to help diversify that layer of consensus as well, or of the protocol. So Netamine is one that we're actively testing in combination with Lodestar as part of the merge as well. So Netamine is a great option. We have one with Besu as well. And then, of course, we have the original setup with Geth, but we want to avoid more people from using Geth if we can help it.
Right now, Get being like this huge majority client is not such a big issue because miners are mostly the ones using it for producing blocks. But eventually, once we come to the merge, the validator is going to be the one producing the blocks, and they will be deciding which of their execution clients are going to be building those blocks. And that could be a huge issue after the merge if everyone's still using Geth, and Geth has a bug. It can create a bunch of conditions leading to a lot of people losing money, and we want to avoid that, right? So eventually, it'd be great if we could push this narrative of like make sure to run a minority execution client as well as using a minority consensus client. So maybe we'll add this link to in the YouTube video description so that people can see it. So let's go back to our choice here. So I decided to use Netamine because it was the first one, but maybe you should decide for yourself which one you wanna run here. So I just copy and pasted this YAML file, and I don't believe I have to change anything in here. So all these configuration options should be good to go for my next step. So once I'm done with entering which configuration option I want to use with Docker Compose, I can just press Control X and I can answer yes to save my file, and I'll have to decide the name of the file. By default, I'll have to overwrite an existing file called dockercompose.yml. So let me just copy and paste the name of the file here into my terminal, and it asks me if I want to overwrite it. I have to say yes. And now I'm good to go for my next step. But before I show the next step here, I just want to show you guys the different kind of configuration options that you can use here. One of the most interesting one is the ability to quick sync your beacon node, right? So if you want to sync from start, it can take a bunch of hours and even a bunch of days before you can get a beacon node that is fully in sync with the latest state of the network. But using a quick sync endpoint like Infura can quickly and like securely get you up to date with the latest sync for the beacon layer. And so I'm not going to be using that, but this is a very interesting section that you should probably be using if you want to speed up your ability to sync your beacon node. I'm not going to be using it, but I'm going to show you guys later on in the logs like how long it can take to sync a beacon layer. We'll see.
Yeah. I'll just add to that. So just to explain a little bit for further context, there is something called weak subjectivity checkpoints as part of that protocol layer, which basically allows you to take a finalized checkpoint of the Ethereum blockchain and basically sync from this point forward and then backfill the entire node all the way back to Genesis. This is meant to get beacon nodes to actually get up to speed much faster without having to necessarily subject yourself to a bunch of security risks. In fact, it's also recommended that in order to prevent yourself from being vulnerable to a long-range attack, for you to actually use something like weak subjectivity syncs.
And I believe Adrian Sutton had a great talk about this in our event at the Dev Connect. So if you guys want to learn more about this, make sure to go and check his talk there. All right, so I guess we are good to go to get started on running our execution client here. This command line here was meant for Geth, but if you want to run the Netamine client, you have to change this one a little. So let me just paste it here, and you'll see here it didn't work because I'm not using Geth. I'll have to be using Netamine Docker for the name of the Docker I want to start. So let me get that one starting, and you'll see it's like doing a bunch of stuff in the background, like downloading the client and like building the images. And once everything is done, you'll see something like creating Netamine Docker done. Right, so the next step would be to see like what Netamine is actually doing, and you can do so by looking at the logs here. So let me just copy and paste this command again, and like the previous one, I'll have to change the geth docker name because I'm not using geth here, I'm using Netamine. And so you can see that in this log here, we can see that Netamine has started and it's currently syncing, right? So you can see that it's downloading some blocks or some data that is going to be used to create the execution layer database. And if you want to keep watching like what Netamine is doing with its log, you can use this flag here -f, and you'll see the live logs just going on, right? So you can see it keeps downloading those ads, and you can see the different peers and like how many peers are connected to. So it shows you a lot of different information about the network that you're syncing to. I believe I made a small mistake here. I don't know if Phil saw it. I believe I'm syncing on mainnet for Netamine. Am I wrong here?
No, you're correct. So basically, the YAML file is already set up so that you're syncing on mainnet. There is a yellow box that makes a little disclaimer for testnet users, actually, where it says if you are looking to sync it with the Goerli testnet, you just have to change one little parameter inside of that command. So it would be config Goerli. Sorry, I missed that as well.
So it's this one, right? So I guess I screwed that one up there. So let me just go back and change my config file.
Yeah. In fact, this will be great because then I can teach you how to actually wipe the volume, and then you can start over from scratch. So that way you know how to like basically clear out your Docker.
All right. So here was the config that I missed. So I was using the config for mainnet. So there's like this execution layer that's called Goerli, which is the one that's required when you want to run on Prater. So I'm have to change that one, save my file again, and then I'll have to remove my image and restart again.
Yeah. I can send you the commands as well if you,
so I guess it's this one, right, or something?
Yeah, that. Sudo docker compose down. You can say stop.
Stop, right. So let me try that one. There we
go. Okay. And then we can actually get rid of the current volume on there as well.
Sure.
So if you do sudo docker volume ls without the hyphen.
Yep.
So that
volume ls
docker space volume space ls.
There you go.
Okay. So if you hit enter, you'll notice that it'll return a bunch of different volumes that you've already set up for Docker. So the one that we're actually going to remove here is actually the Lodestar Netamine Docker. So the command to actually do that is sudo space docker, space rm, and then space Lodestar underscore Netamine Docker.
Guess I have this.
It's sudo docker volume remove. That's it. That's what we're missing there. Remove. Volume is in use. Okay, so that makes sense actually because we haven't gone rid of the container yet. So if you do actually sudo docker ps, you can actually see what's actually running. Okay, so there's nothing running. And then we'll do sudo docker. We got to remove the container. So actually sudo docker rm, and then Netamine underscore docker.
All right, let me try that one.
Yeah, that should remove that container. And now we can do the original volume remove command.
There you go.
Okay, that's it. So now that database is wiped, basically.
and we'll be able to restart our Netamine Docker
Correct.
container, right?
Yeah.
And there you go. And now if we have a look at the logs that we were looking at just a few minutes ago, we should be now syncing on the Girly network, right? So here it says that we're on the Girly network, and it's currently looking for peers. So eventually it'll try to find more peers, and once it finds a bunch of peers, it'll be able to download the state of the Girly network. And you can see right now it actually found a few, and it's currently downloading some of this state, right? So I guess we went through all of these different steps to come back and fix this minor issue, but that was a good practice. So if that happens to you as well, you'll be able to get a better understanding of like what's going on under all of these tools.
Yeah, so all of the testnet related disclaimers are all in those yellow boxes in the setup guide. So if you are setting up on testnet, please follow those as well.
Awesome. So I guess we are done with our execution client now. Let's go to the next step, which would be to start the beacon node client, I guess. All right, so we just did this part, start the execution node service. Let's go and start the Lodestar beacon node service. So this one is just like the other one. It's a simple Docker compose command with the beacon node container here. So let's start it up. Like it did with Netamine, it's downloading a bunch of stuff. It's building the image, and it's starting it here. So all we get is this line here, creating Lodestar beacon node _1 line done. But if we want to actually see what's going on, we have to check out either with sudo docker ps to see like what are the image that are being that are running right now, and we have to call this other command to see the actual log for the beacon node here. So let's call this command. We can see here that Lodestar started with version 0.34, but I guess this is the wrong version, right, Phil?
Yeah, so actually when we released 0.36, we did not update that, but what's more important is just compare the commit, which is 28 echo 2 Charlie 74 Charlie. That is actually the 0.36 version. We'll be pushing a hotfix for that.
And I had that issue the other day too, so I was just wondering which version of Lodestar was running, but don't despair there. This is the 0.36 version here. And so it's searching for peers now. I'm not like actually looking at the latest logs as they come through, but if you add the -f flag there, you'll be able to see like the logs live coming in here, and you can see that it's still syncing and searching for more peers, I guess, because I see here that I only have 4 peers. So as your clients run, it'll try to find more peers, and it'll help syncing faster. But you can see an estimate of like how long it's supposed to take to sync the whole network, and right now you can see that it's probably gonna take like a few days, right? I'm getting like 9.5 days left here. So hopefully it'll take less than 9 days to sync the whole network for this Prater testnet. But if you were to be using the quick sync, as we saw previously, that would only take like a few minutes, like maybe 2 minutes or something.
Yeah, just to add to that, as I mentioned before, syncing from Genesis is not necessarily recommended just due to the vulnerabilities for long range attacks. However, we are doing some updates to our database, which will help with the slots per second in which we verify all the data going back from Genesis. So it may be a bit slow depending on your hardware requirements and stuff, but at the end of the day, quick sync your beacon node if you can.
Yeah, that's the suggestion I tell everyone to use. So I press Control-C here to quit this live streaming of the logs, and we will keep moving here. So you can also start the Prometheus and Graphana services, and those services are very interesting if you want to do monitoring or alerting. Those are very useful. I'm not gonna go too deep into those. That's not the whole point of this tech demo, but you should definitely check those out as well. Now, for the most interesting part here, I'm gonna set up the validator for Lodestar. The first part of this will be to create this directory for holding the key stores, right? So the key stores are these files that are generated by the keygens, either the staking deposit CLI tool or the Wagyu keygen. And so they need to be accessible for the Lodestar validator client. So we'll just create this new directory here to hold them. And we'll have to copy our key stores there. And I don't know if you remember, I created mine in a directory on my desktop. So let me just list those files there. I called that directory keys. And you can see that when I generated those files, I generated one key store and one deposit data file. And so all I need are the key store files. And since I only generated for one validator, I only have one. And so all I'll be doing here is copying that file from where I generated those files into this new directory to hold all the key store for Lodestar. And so if you were to generate your keys on a different machine, you'd have to copy them on a USB stick or a USB drive, or like transfer them in some ways and copy them back to your staking machine. So let me just copy that file back from my desktop into this new directory I just created. There you go. And so if I list the files into my key store directory, I should see that I now have this new key store file. And so the key store file has the signing keys that is required to perform all your validator's duties. So that's required for the validator client. And so that's what's explained in all these detail here in this guide. I just went through and did the copy myself here. The next step would be to create this key store password directory and key store password file. So Lodestar needs to know what is the password that you use to create those key stores. And that password was the one I entered when I was using the Wagyu keygen tool. If you were to use the staking deposit CLI tool, you would be also asked for a password to protect your key store. And so I just created the key store's password directory, and now I'll be creating the password file. So I'll open that file with Nano, and I'll just enter my password here. In my case, I used the very weak password called password, but in your case, maybe you want to use like a stronger password. And so once I'm done with that, I'm pretty much finished configuring the validator keys for Lodestar. The next step will be to simply go ahead and create the YAML file for the validator client. And so this is very similar to what we already did with the beacon node. We started by calling Nano to create a new file, and we just copy and paste this whole configuration YAML file here. And if you have to change any of these options, you can manually do so if you know what you're doing, but like the default configuration options should be just fine with the instruction that were provided in the guide here. So I'm just going to leave them as is. Type Control X, type yes to save the file, and type the file name here. So the YAML file for the validator client is called docker-compose.validator.yml. So let me just copy and paste the file. It already exists within the directory I'm currently in, so I have to override it, and I should be good there. The last step would be just to tell Docker Compose to start this new container image. So let me just go ahead and do that. And we should now have this new container called Lodestar underscore validator underscore one that is going to be running our Lodestar validator client. So just like the other Docker container that we created and we wanted to watch, we could use Docker PS to show what's currently running. And we can see that we have this new, I guess it's this one, the latest one.
Yep, the right way at the top. Yep.
The Lodestar validator underscore one container that's running our validator client. And a good practice is to check out the logs of it. So let me just go ahead and type Docker logs and the name of the container. And we can see going back to the initial log lines that the validator client was able to decrypt one local keystore that has this public key. And so these kinds of logs shows that everything's fine so far. You'll notice here we have this log line saying node is syncing. What does that tell us, Phil?
Yeah, so basically right now, as you know, we've done this tech setup, it does take time for us to, first of all, sync on the Goerli network, but also sync on the consensus, which is the Prater network. So you will get returns from the validator client saying the node is syncing, error on get proposer duties. That's nothing to be afraid of. It just means that your beacon node has not been synced up yet, so it's not able to get the duties that it needs to perform. So these will disappear as your beacon node syncs up, and any sort of additional outputs at that point will be when your validator is actually proposing things. So if you see nothing, that's actually a good thing.
Good to know, right? So that's just one way to validate that everything that you did was done properly. And I guess we're pretty much done, right? In terms of setting up our machine, installing all the software, and configuring the client.
Yeah, so in addition to this, what I usually like to do is also just reboot the node just to make sure everything comes back online and actually reboots and continues working. So that's another test that you can do for yourself afterwards. The other thing as well is further down on the setup guide, it'll teach you how to actually pull new images when we push out updates and such like that. So if everything that you need to know is pretty much on that guide, and if you experience any sort of additional issues that maybe we have not seen or need help with, please feel free to let us know. We're always available on Discord to help people who are having issues with the guide and also just with the client in general.
So I want to have a quick look at part 4, which we did not do yet, which would be the next logical step to do here. Part 4 would be to do the deposit for your validator. So depending on which network you are using, you'll have to do a deposit of 32 ETH if you're on mainnet, or 32 Go ETH if you're on Goerli for the Prater network. And so there's these website from the Ethereum community called the Launchpad. There's one for the mainnet, which is this link here, and there's one for Prater, which I could potentially use to do the deposit. But like I said previously, getting Goerli ETH to do your deposit for testing running a validator on Prater can be difficult. If you need help, make sure to get in touch with the eStaker community. We can help you do the deposit. Unfortunately, we cannot give you the actual Go ETH, but we can do the deposit for you. So if you were to go to the Prater Launchpad, you'd see this lovely website where it explains everything in terms of the risk that you'll be facing, what are the technology behind it. You'll have to accept a bunch of terms. They're not really terms, but they're just explanation of like what's going on and what you should be aware of in terms of like security and in terms of risk that you're accepting when you're running your own validator here. But eventually the Launchpad website will ask you for your deposit file. That file is the one that was created with the keys. So if I go back to my desktop here, when I created my keystore using the Wagyu keygen tool, it also created this deposit data file that will be requested by this Launchpad website, and eventually it'll ask you to do the deposit with an account on, and you could use MetaMask or you could use any of the other different account that are supported on the Launchpad there. So I'm not gonna do this step. Like I said, getting girly ETH is a little hard these days because of the abuse that were happening on the girly network. But if you were to do this on mainnet, you'd have to provide your own 32 ETH. If you want to do this on Prater for running your own test, you can ask the ETHStaker community and we'll be glad to help you with that one. So that was for part 4. And if I go back to the final remarks and next step, as Phil mentions, there's a few sections here to help you update your Docker containers. This one is for the Go Ethereum, the Geth Docker container. This one is on how you can update the Lodestar container. So like if there's a new version of Lodestar, you should definitely update your Lodestar Docker container and make sure that you're using the latest version, especially if there's any bugs or any improvements in terms of performance or in terms of new features that you might want to use. So these remarks are pretty good, and I guess there's a few sections that are coming up soon as well. So I guess that's pretty much it, right, Phil? Is there anything else we forgot to mention?
No, I think we pretty much covered most of it. I mean, you basically have a Lodestar node set up now with Netamine, which is a very ideal setup for what the beacon chain and the execution chain needs at this point in time, which is some client diversity. So even just doing it on testnet and getting familiar with the different clients that are out there is always something that we highly recommend people do. There are definitely people in the community who can help you with the Gorley ETH problem at the moment, but please, we are all very receptive to other users coming to us and asking us questions about Lodestar, because we obviously do want people to run it to help ensure that client diversity remains a #1 priority to the health of the network. So please give Lodestar a try, and we're always looking for feedback. We're always looking for help. So if there's anybody out there who's looking to see how to work Lodestar, how to build Lodestar from a more developer perspective, please feel free to reach out to us. There's a lot that we can do to involve you with the project and with the Ethereum community as a whole.
Awesome. And don't forget, guys, if you need any help, make sure to get in touch with the Lodestar community. They have this nice Discord that I've been using myself whenever I had any issues. Phil is there as well. He can help you, and I can help you if I know what you're talking about. We also have this ETHStaker community that can help you with a bunch of these problems. So make sure to ask us. We are always there. Helpful and ready to help you with like everything that you need. So I hope you enjoy. I hope you liked it. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you guys next time.